So how many speakers do we have now? We have only 3 speakers.
Manju ma'am, I am broadcasting it.
एक मिनट ठहर जाओ, मैंने ना पीछे से वो भी चलाना है, and then I'll tell you when to let it go live.
Ma'am, I have a suggestion. In case if you can't see me, at least I will try to remain audible so that everybody else can hear me.
Let's get this started. I'll put myself on mute, then I'll talk to you. Okay, Monali?
Okay, ma'am.
Swachh Bharat is not just a mission for a cleaner India. It's a part of a greater global mission of tackling climate change. A responsibility towards sustainability.
Okay,
a
start,
duty towards
please.
our nation.
Yes, ma'am.
Towards our future generations.
Broadcast.
And towards our planet. That is why Swachhata is ingrained in our DNA. As an ecologically proactive university, Shulini is at the forefront of cleanliness and sustainability best practices. We plant 5,000 plus trees every year, all geotagged. We actively work with 6 villages under the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. We produce 2 times the solar energy that we consume. We recycle our waste and water. We harvest rainwater. And we build inspirational and energy efficient buildings. Our hostels are among the cleanest. And with 700 plus dustbins, we are changing habits for a better India. Shulini University, proud to be a part of the Swachh Bharat mission.
With that, I welcome you all to the second day of the seminar, the International Literature Seminar being organized by the English Department of Shulini University. We started last week on Friday. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So welcome all, and welcome all those whom we cannot see on the screen. It's good to have you back here. We started on Friday. On Friday, we had the inaugural session in which Professor Mukesh Williams spoke to our delegates. He's from Japan, from Soka University, Japan, and he gave an overview of the 20th century. Yesterday, we had the first technical session, as it is called, and we discussed The Wasteland and The Outsider by Camus. So these were the main texts that we discussed, and we also talked about the poetry of Philip Larkin. So this was the modernist period that we were dealing with yesterday. And today, we will be talking about modernism again. We will be discussing 2 main texts today, that is Lord of the Flies and 1984. Now, yesterday, when we were talking about T.S. Eliot, there was a thought that came to my mind, a quotation from Eliot. He says, time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future.
Tradition
and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. This is from 4 Quartets, Burnt Norton. So we were talking about the early 20th century yesterday and discussing what, the scenes described by Mukesh last week, by Mukesh Williams. We realized that the age in which we are living now is really not very different. We have our own challenges, different kind of challenges, but still there are the scene that we see around us is as bleak as it was 100 years ago. Not a very comforting thought, but there are things that we have to face, and the reality of the world is something that we have to live with. So with that, I welcome you all here, but a few preliminary remarks today also. To the chair first. The chair is Professor Roshan Lal Sharma. Roshan Lal, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have the panelists with you, and I request you to give them 12 minutes each, stretchable by 1 minute. Discussions will take place at the end. 1 or 2 points that you need to keep in mind is that our seminar was originally planned right up to Friday, but it's going to spill over to Saturday. It can't be helped because we are not getting enough time to talk to you all. So you make your presentations and we have maybe 1 or 2 questions at the end, but ye dil mange more, you know, ye dil mange more. So we want more conversations with you. And so we are going to bring you back on Saturday at 2 o'clock again, the same time. And it'll be a sort of a virtual valedictory. And in this, we hope to have some interaction between you and the Vice President of our university, Avni Khosla. Hopefully she will join us. We have requested her. Another request that I need to make is please do not read your paper. You have only 12 minutes. You have your points somewhere here, somewhere with you. Look at them and address the people you see on the screen. As far as possible, try and look straight, because, you know, even when we look at the panelists, we are not looking straight, we are looking a little down. So if you start reading, then the impact of what you want to say will be lost. I also have a request to all the people who are attending, and there's a large number that is attending that is not on screen. My request is please do not text any messages to the panelists, because as it is, they're online and they are focused on what they have to say, the questions that they have to ask, and the discussion that they have to participate in. So please do not distract them unless it is a matter of life and death. And I hope it's not a matter of life and death. We have a sort of SOS from our panelists who will appear tomorrow, who's slated to appear tomorrow probably. I have to check the schedule. He's from Bangladesh, and he is telling us something that we've been hearing in the news, that Chakravarti Tufan is about to approach Bangladesh, and he is in that very area, the Khulna area, where it will impact the most. So Ahmed, Professor Ahmed Ehsanuzan, if you are listening, never mind, if you can join us, it will be very nice. If you can't join us, we will adjust you in a later session. And even if that is not possible, we'll have some way or the other to have your presentation sooner or later. Right. So with that, I am going to hand over the proceedings to Roshan in just a minute or so. And Roshan Lal Sharma is, well, you may or may not believe it, he's one of our boys. He's one of our boys, and he's a Solon boy. He's somebody we are all very fond of, and he's been associated with Mellow for a long time when he was just out of his teens, in fact. Am I right, Roshan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it was one such seminar. I won't say it was one such seminar, but it was a seminar in which, you know, we picked him up. Sorry, Roshan. Sorry, Roshan.
You did. That's a matter of fact.
Yeah. So we spotted him at
So grateful.
and we said, what the hell are you doing here in a small place and denying the world of the potential that you have? And so we kind of roped him into our Mellow conferences, and well, see what he's become now. He has grown, not just this way, but this way. Sorry, Roshan, but as I said, you're one of our boys. And
Again, a matter of fact.
Just as Roshan has grown, well, academically, professionally, I'm sure all the others who have joined us in the last few years will grow. And at least through Mellow and now through Shulini, well, we hope to do this kind of mentoring work, getting youngsters into our fold and helping them find their feet professionally and go ahead in their academic careers. So Roshan is one, what they call Jita Jagta example. Huh? So I'm handing it over to you, Roshan.
Thank you.
All the best. And to the panelists also, please introduce the panelists. You have the list with you. You have the list with you, Roshan.
Well, ma'am, a very good afternoon to all the panelists, to Ma'am Jaitka. Thank you very much for such a nice introduction. Thank you. I appreciate that. Everything that you said basically is a matter of fact. And frankly, I have no words to express my gratitude. Thank you. The kind of mentorship that you have.
Roshan, 1 minute. I forgot to tell you that Roshan, you know, you should give me some excuse, you know, some concession for my advanced years. Roshan is a professor and dean and director and provost and name it, and he is that. Huh? But he can accommodate that and much more of the English department in Central University of Himachal Pradesh in Dharamshala. And he has invited all of us there. Even if you haven't, Roshan, I'm inviting everyone to come to Dharamshala.
Thanks very much. Yeah,
And
that stands.
He's been very active with our Mellow Association and with others, and almost every day now he's invited to give a lecture, a talk, or a webinar somewhere or the other. So that is Roshan for you. He's also been a Fulbrighter. He's also been a Fulbrighter, and I'm happy to say I was one of his referees. So Roshan, I'm sorry I'm taking some of your credit. You deserve it.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but प्यार में सभी कुछ हो जाता है, huh? Right. So Roshan, over to you, and I will not interrupt now unless it's a matter of life and death. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Just feel free, ma'am, to interrupt. I know. Anything that you come up with is going to have that creative touch, and we appreciate that. This criticality and creativity find such a wonderful blend in you, and that is what, we always appreciate. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. I welcome all the panelists. I have this complete list before me with Mr. Nilak Datta, Pratima, Debabrati, Gaurav, Monali, and Rashmi. So 6 in all. And as ma'am has clearly stated, 12 minutes. I would urge you all, I'll request you all to just wind it up within 12. In case it exceeds a little, make sure you finish it off, before 13 minutes. So with that, see, I mean, we are already in the thick of this seminar now. So much has been talked about, right from the inaugural, that is the keynote section. Professor Williams, set the ball rolling in such a wonderful way. What a survey he presented before us, and he just opened up most of the arenas for us, to look into, to think about, and to deliberate upon. So without any ado, I'll request our first speaker today, Nilak Datta, who is going to speak on Orwell's doublethink as post-industrial post-truth. Mr. Nilak Datta. Yeah, over to Nilak Datta, who is assistant professor in BITS Pilani. Yeah.
Nilak sir, I think you are on mute. Please unmute yourself. You're not audible.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. Thank you.
you're audible
Yes,
now.
sir. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all for introducing me. I am Dr. Nilak Datta, and first of all, I would like to thank the trustees of Shulini University for giving us this lovely opportunity to present at this conference. Secondly, the Department of English, of course, at Shulini University for organizing this wonderful seminar, brilliant conference in the first place. Now, as I have taught George Orwell's 1984 in classes, I have approached the novel as partaking of two separate trajectories. First, I usually try to, as I teach my students, find parallels between the novel's concept of doublethink and the issue of post-truth as a condition of knowledge in contemporary society. Secondly, I try to teach how 1984's doublethink represents the critique of an engagement of an emergent transition from the industrial to the post-industrial society, at least from the first world's point of view. Now, Orwell may well have written about totalitarianism in the Soviet system, and he did actually when he was working on the novel. However, when I teach students from engineering backgrounds, engineering and science backgrounds at BITS Pilani, I find that they're curious not about the problems of the Soviet system, but about the protagonist's work at the records office, the Ministry of Truth, and the way in which Orwell describes the hero, Winston Smith, by the way, that's his name, describes him falsifying records and factual data whenever it suited the agenda of Big Brother. A scholar who has been working on the post-truth phenomenon in a very separate way has examined the post-truth phenomenon, and he has called such maneuvers as weaponized lies. And he looks at the dissemination of false information through internet channels and through media platforms. So many scholars, interestingly, writing about post-truth as a phenomenon, are concerned about this intensity of false beliefs which arise out of these untested claims and the public's unquestioning confidence that these things are true. For example, just to mention one scholar, Daniel Levitin, I think he's from MIT. Daniel Levitin argues that the danger today is that lies and misinformation have been weaponized to produce social and political ends that would perhaps in earlier times have been subject to more verification. As such, he tends to discuss how it is possible to falsify statistics, not necessarily always by conjuring them up, but sometimes by representing them in a very different light. For instance, Tim Cook, who is still the CEO of Apple Industries, reportedly used a cumulative sales graph to show how sales of the iPhone kept increasing when in fact actual sales over the previous fiscal quarters had been decreasing. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that it is possible to misrepresent facts by comparing items that are different from one another and to convince a population that this sort of stuff is true. Now, Winston Smith, to get back to the novel, his work at the Records Office in the book 1984, though much more direct, is very eerily similar. I repeat, eerily similar. As he changes production figures in Oceania, the super state in which he lives, he sees how statistics have become a mode of knowing the social world of industrial labor. At this point, I would like to, I have my copy of the novel with me. I would like to read out a little passage here. Day by day and almost minute by minute, the past was brought up to date. In this way, every prediction made by the party could be shown by documentary evidence to have been correct. And end quote. And it goes sort of goes on and on. Now, one of the reasons why I quoted this portion was that knowledge, which has become the foci of data banks, knowledge as data bank, knowledge as synonymous with data banks, this sort of stuff has received quite a bit of critical traction. Jean Baudrillard and Jean-François Lyotard, in fact, write about this matter in relation to the postmodern condition. While Baudrillard sees simulation of the social realities in statistics and in data modeling, the hyperreal as he calls it, Lyotard sees the postmodern famously as both a condition, I repeat, a condition of disbelief in meta-narratives, and as an era, as an epoch, where knowledge production is a play of commercial expectations. Of course, a more thoroughly grounded, culturally grounded investigation would be found in Frederick Jameson's famous critique of consumer capital in his famous postmodernism book, which I don't have to really remind you of. But I digress. To return to doublethink as a concept. Again, I would like to draw your attention, ladies and gentlemen, to a specific quote that I'm very fond of mentioning in class. And this is what doublethink means. To know and not to know, to know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic. This is how Winston thinks about this. The state of being truthful and untruthful at the same time, leaving one in a state of intellectual limbo, is doublethink. One is aware of falsehood while at the same time knowing the full truth, a sort of active denial process. Now, later on in the novel, of course, Winston reads from a supposedly radical underground political pamphlet written by a fictional character who has been conjured up by the party, Emmanuel Goldstein, that doublethink is the power of holding two contradictory, if I remember, two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. So later on, this is also referred to as a system of thought where both conditions can exist simultaneously. So doublethink is both a power in the sense of capacity, power, I have power, capacity, shamata, right? Or a system of thought, a process by which knowledge is understood to be valid. However, let me also say that the novel does not solely rest on this premise. It rests also on the connection between the kind of citizenship which is needed to follow this system and state power. And it is here that where I get into this conversation with my students about post-truth aspect of doublethink, which I believe plays an active part in providing the intellectual ballast for the destruction of social labor. Now, Winston, as those of you who are familiar with the novel know, very often has to hoard up on shoelaces and razor blades, commodities that are very, very common, even though the official broadcasts announce an increase in industrial production in Oceania. The majority of the labor in Oceania is performed by what Daniel Bell, a prominent theorist of the post-industrial society, had called the service sector. He had in fact called it the services sector. We tend to use the term service sector, borrowing his terminology. In Oceania, the fruits of industrial production do not reach the majority, as it seems. So society, interestingly, does not suffer from any lack of professionalism. The coercive power of management, the powers of asset relocation, the conquest of labor that characterizes the post-industrial theories of people such as Daniel Bell, or even John Kenneth Galbraith, the famous John Kenneth Galbraith, who was the ambassador to India during the Nehruvian era, are almost prefigured, in fact, in Orwell's book of 1939. So in this book, in fact, in his book, The New Industrial State, John Kenneth Galbraith, another important figure in the post-industrial movement, had noted that in the age of turbulent social labor relations, the labor force, comprising of the great homogeneous blue-collar proletariat, pickets outside the gates in full view, while managers, engineers, designers, clerks, stenographers, auditors, salesmen, all these people are in deep shadow. These latter are in deep shadow because they are needed by the technostructure. So, and interestingly, it's a fact that he had spent a lot of time in India, and from his own understanding of Indian labor problems, he sort of saw this happening. Now, Symes, to get back to the novel, Symes, who is an acquaintance of Winston, for example, is a lexicographer and devotedly works to compile the Ingsoc dictionary. Julia, who eventually then becomes Winston's secret lover in the book, helps churn out mass market pulp fiction. The records department where he works alone is swarming with workers, teeming with an unimaginable multitude of characters of these jobs. Printing shops, for instance, have sub-editors, typographical experts, teleprogramming experts, engineers, teams of workers and actors, armies of these reference clerks. The whole book is full of them. But in sharp contrast, I have to say this, that in 1984, we see no production line workers who work in factories. There is a shortage of boots, for instance, in the novel. While tinkering with the statistics on boot production, for instance, Winston imagines or thinks that there is a likelihood that no boots had been produced at all. The figures simulated production in the sense that Baudrillard would later talk about simulation in excess every fiscal quarter. No one cared if half of Oceania went about barefoot. To understand these, Winston starts reading a book, or rather Orwell plans a book within a book, and this book is called The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, which discusses the trend of continuous warfare between the three superstates, Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, as an acceleration of earlier wars that had been fought. The circulation of commodities is the very first casualty in this crisis. The continuous war is for the conquest of labor power. More precisely, blue-collar proletariat labor power, which is a bottomless reserve of cheap labor, as I recall him putting it. This labor power produces enough commodities to ensure a leisure society, but a society where inequality has ceased to exist will find no use for a privileged minority. And as such, this enormous labor pool's social production does not go into equitable distribution. A post-industrial bourgeoisie in this book retains its position by ensuring that continuous warfare, both real and a state of mind, exists. War eats up any kind of surplus production. Preparation for war ensures scarcity of resources. So basically, putting it, abundance in principle and scarcity in practice become the structural aspects of this wonderful seesaw between truth and post-truth. Now, in conclusion, I will say that, of course, there are many other aspects of the novel that I haven't even touched. which include the question of the malleability of history, history as fiction, history as constructs. Aspects of the novel in 1984 seems to have offered up for later reworking in the postmodern tradition. But my engineering and science undergrad students tend to be fascinated, utterly fascinated with the idea of the post-industrial, because they're going to join the, that's their future, so to speak. They tend to be fascinated with the idea of the post-industrial as less of a desirable social state, but more as a long-term strategy to ensure compliance with the status quo. Now, as I have reminded my students in online classes, my engineering and science students, an increasingly prosperous nation in a globalized age that is apparently inching towards a leisure society, post-industrial leisure society, has very little to offer, I have to say this, very little to offer migrant workers, who with their socially organized labor afford the bourgeoisie the leisure of quiet contemplation in very troubled times. And this, I believe, is what my students tend to take away from the lectures that I give them. So thank you for listening, and I will be happy to take any questions later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Nilak. Thank you very much. We appreciate. I think we are going to have questions towards the end of it. Let's have presentations first. All right, Nilak, thank you very much. It's a wonderful take. Of course, I would also be interested to know more about this issue of post-truth as an epistemological condition. I would like you to dwell a little more on that, particularly from the viewpoint of master's students. Thank you very much, Nilak. Appreciate. I mean, it was a wonderful, very engaging presentation. And now I would like to invite Pratima, and Pratima Agnihotri is going to speak on The Lost Words, an alternative look at 1984. Pratima Agnihotri actually is at English and Foreign Languages, BMCC Language Lab, Pune. May I request Pratima Agnihotri to make her presentation, please? Yeah, Pratima, can you hear me?
Pratima ma'am, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself. Pratima ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Pratima, you are audible now. Please go ahead with your presentation.
So good afternoon, everybody. I would like to say that I indeed enjoy participating in this. Special seminar. Let me explain why. This was the theme of this seminar. The theme of the seminar is a century retrospect, and all the texts that form the literary signposts in this century retrospect are essentially British American, that is, if we consider T.S. Eliot an American and or European. As a student who is energized on the Empire Right Back kind of booster dose, I wonder if these texts can also amount to creation of a canon. Creation of a canon. Yeah?
Your voice is not clear.
Hello?
Your voice is not clear.
Yeah. Voice is not clear.
There's something wrong with your audio and also with your video.
Should I start?
No, there's something. It's all echoing. Do you have any headphones that you can use?
Can you
not really.
We
Because
can't make out what you are saying because it's all echoing.
It's echoing, and what you could do
what
is
should be done?
Your volume should be a little less. Try it. Volume. A little less.
Volume.
Try and speak out now.
Okay. I was saying that it's really interesting participating in this seminar because the theme of the seminar is a century in retrospect. But if you were to look at the text that most of us are analyzing, all of these signposts, watershed texts of the last century, are essentially written by British American and or European authors. Now, as a student energized on the Empire Right Backs kind of booster dose, I wondered if this text also amount to creation of a canon. Though the post-Nicholas program of such a canon making has to be the theme of a totally separate kind of seminar, right now I wonder how I, a student of literature who grown on the post-colonial and post-colonial kind of critic, how do I analyze the text like 1984? I would like to say that especially because George Eliot, I would like to say that our author is well known essentially for his anti-colonial stance. Given all that, how does one go about analyzing such a critic? And my submission would be, the best solution to such a dilemma is to read a canonical text like 1984 against the grain. Indeed, Indian 1984 has been critiqued in such a way. For example, feminists find the text very misogynist. Similarly, much water has flown down that bridge entitled the Panopticon Vision in 1984. Then, given all these things, how do I read 1984 against the grain? My submission in the presentation is that 1984 is basically a polyphonic text. It has, I'm trying to suggest, a plurality of narratives. And right now I'll be looking at, of this plurality of narratives, right now I'll be looking at two. So I'd like to argue that the novel, now I'm saying, has two basic narratives. Previous surface level dystopia, and just below that world of annihilation of all sorts, it sets another narrative, an unmistakable utopian narrative, kind of narrative that is a parallel and a powerful world of empathy, of human and humane togetherness. And it is this alternative narrative that provides in 1984 an inbuilt critique of and a true alternative to the party and its dystopian version of reality. And I would also like to argue that actually, if you were to read the novel carefully, you would realize that Orwell is truly prioritizing this subtextual utopian alternative narrative. Now, I would like to say that if the dystopian narrative is full of binaries, the alternative utopian narrative transcends binaries. To give you a few examples, in the dystopian surface level narrative, what do we have essentially? There are multiplicities, or there is a plethora of binaries. Can you hear me? There is a plethora of binaries.
Plethora of binaries, yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying that in the, let me give you a few examples. For example, we have obviously the Goldstein versus the Big Brother binary, or we have the party proles binary. We have asexual Catherine versus over-sexualized Julia kind of binary. If there's sign, there's a binary, he posits a binary with somebody like Parsons. Similarly, if Winston stands for brain, Julia is essentially body. And so on and on and on. One could sort of multiply the examples endlessly. On the contrary, the utopian narrative is a world that celebrates the holistic, quasi-Edenic version of oneness. Now, the next point I would like to make is that the utopian vision novel is pulsating right not only in any one particular part of the book, but throughout the book. It's to be found there from part 1 to part 3. In fact, I would like to argue that this alternative vision, the alternative version, is so important to Orwell that essentially we can find it in all the parts of the novel. Now, I'd like to exactly analyze what exactly is this alternative narrative at all. I'd like to say that first and foremost, it's pastoral alternative to the grimy, dirty metro city of London. So we have in this narrative the golden country, and repeatedly the novel is using this notion of golden country as a uh, as a mode of celebration. The golden country is an ambience of plenitude. It's a cornucopia of all that is natural and bountiful. Now, I'd also like to argue that unlike the dystopian narrative that objectifies women, the examples of this objective women in the dystopian narrative would obviously be the proletarian prostitute, or even Julia for that example. The alternative narrative valorizes women. Versions of this could be Mrs. Parson and her suffering, or the singing. Can you hear me? Or the proletarian mother. What should be done?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Go a little slowly, but don't stop.
Okay. So I was saying that I'm now trying to analyze the alternative narrative that is prioritized by the author. And I'm trying to suggest that the first point that I made was the alternative narrative is essentially pastoral in nature. And I try to contrast it with the grimy, dirty metro city of London. And I also try to talk about the notion called golden country. And I'm trying to say that in the dystopian narrative, there is an objectification of women. I gave examples such as, for example, Julia herself is objectified. I'd also like to say that obviously there's a reference to proletariat prostitute as well. On the contrary, the alternative narrative valorizes the feminine. And I was trying to give some examples of that. An example could be Mrs. Parsons and her treatment, or the proletarian mother when eternally drying the diapers, but singing it, but celebrating it through a song. Then yet another example would be Winston's baby sister, who smiles because others laugh. And last but not the least, obviously Winston's mother. Winston's mother is presented here as a very humane presence. Most interestingly, I would like to say that the memoir as a mode of narrative in this novel begins and ends with her memories. Therefore, the submission that I am making in my paper is that in the dystopian narrative, Winston betrays Julia, with whom he has maybe a tryst of hardly 5 months. But in the parallel utopian narrative, the mother, emotions that cannot be controlled by the party from outside, the mother, who does not betray, and she stays. And she's the stuff that our author is valorizing. Now, as the memoir mode in the alternative narrative begins and ends with the mother, fine, with essentially her all-embracing kind of vision, all betrayals, I would like to say that it is her story that is being truly valorized in the novel. So essentially, I would like to argue that the last image in the novel that stays with us is of the mother, not of Julia who is betrayed, but of the mother. Fine? And in that last image, she's not merely maternal. She's, in fact, for the novel, I would like to say that she's not merely. In fact, I'd like to say the last image that stays with her is the image of a woman who is happy, fulfilled, who is an essentialized presence. Then, next, I would like to say that if the dystopia in the novel repeatedly provides multiple examples of the Enlightenment rationality as well as the instrumental vision, the Parallel utopian narrative prioritizes what one could say is essentially a very relational narrative, a very relational presentation. So much so that Julia, the the rebel essentially from West downwards, even she remembers her grandfather. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the alternative narrative prioritizes not instrumentality, not rationality, but essentially a uh, relational kind of narrative. If it is so, I would also like to argue the narrative is utopian in the signification of the term itself. Just look at the etymology of the term utopia. The term utopia as the term utopia.
Pratima,
Yeah.
Pratima Roshan, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you know, the voice is echoing so much that we can't really make out what you are saying. Huh? And I think I need to explain to everyone that because it is a new medium that we are trying out, is my voice clear to you all? Yeah, because it's a new medium that we are trying out for the first time. So there are bound to be there's bound to be glitches somewhere down the line. And Pratima, there is something wrong with your audio and speaker. So have got a rough idea of what exactly you wish to say, but we can't get the grasp of your argument, the way your argument is moving. So perhaps we are going to keep your presentation for another day, but we have got an idea of the points that you wish to convey. So I'm sorry for intervening like this, but Roshan, what do you have to say?
Roshan sir, you are not audible, sir.
Roshan, you're not audible. You're not even muted.
You are muted, sir. Please unmute yourself.
Am I okay now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Am I audible? Yeah, Pratima ji, thank you very much. Yeah, I actually got somehow. I had to strain hard, even though a presentation in a very staccato kind of rhythm, but somehow, the subtextual alternatives that you have worked on, I mean, do make sense. But yeah, a larger part of your presentation actually went amiss. I'm sorry. But yeah, we got the crux of it, and definitely, I mean, there are going to be some questions at least. Let me repeat the title of your presentation once again, so that I mean, we've got the viewers, from across India and other countries also. The title is "The Lost Worlds: An Alternative Look at 1984." With that, Pratima Agnihotri, I thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, and may I now move on to Debabrati Bandyopadhyay, who is professor in the Department of English, Vishwa Bharati Central University, Shantiniketan. Professor Debabrati Bandyopadhyay. And the title of the presentation is Institutionalizing Ideas of Panopticon and Mind Games in 1984, Heritage and Legacy. Something which was in passing touched upon by Pratima as well. Professor Bandyopadhyay, please.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll begin by talking about a point of view which says that this book is obsolete. I'll begin by shocking you a little. I'll begin by referring to the opinion that holds 1984 guilty of being a work of legacy future. In 2010, Adam Elker criticized the poor futurism of 1984 and denounced it as a legacy future that is holding us back. He was actually quoting this idea from Hemek Cascio, and the idea of legacy future actually tells us this. Old visions, I'm going to read this out. So, quote, old visions of the future that have thoroughly colonized our minds so much that we cannot help but make reference to them in our thoughts about both the future and the present, unquote. Elkos was using this idea to criticize 1984, and he was trying to say that Orwell had made a bold prediction about modern technology, political or otherwise, which would enable any regime to completely control its subjects. To Elkos, this is not true. This has not come true, except possibly in North Korea, which he talks about as if it is a very isolated, depressing kind of a place. But apart from that, he says that not even in China, which exercises state control to a great level, to a great extent, this is not true of China even, according to Elkos. He goes on to say that many Chinese citizens are possibly quite happy with their material conditions, and they have not been brainwashed to do those things, to say those things. Now, the problem is that to Elkos, he thinks that the Western world is very much liberated. They face freedom even now. And he says that if you want a cure to your idea that the Western world has been turned into some kind of a technological totalitarian state, then just go to Pyongyang for a moment and you will come running back with a happy face to your own democratic Western society. Because it does not behave like the big brother at all. So, according to Elkos, there is no tyranny exercised in our present and Orwell's future, the way Orwell predicted. So, in this case, he is describing 1984 as a work of legacy future, which has got stuck in our minds in such a way that we understand how awesome a writer our Orwell is, because it still leaves this impression upon our minds and we are stuck with that idea. But the predictions did not come true the way they were talked about in the book, and we are unduly frightened and kept in this condition of unduly frightened condition actually. And this gives rise to a whole lot of literature and movies like The Matrix, etc. But 1984, according to Elkos, has proved to be incorrect in its prophecy, and therefore, I quote, according to him, it is time to consign 1984 to the historical dustbin, like some other text. Now, when we learn about this particular viewpoint, I am reminded of doublethink, double newspeak, and later on, what people began to talk about in terms of the doublespeak, doublethink and newspeak combined as doublespeak in general terms. When I read this denunciation of the work, along with the numerous critical and creative voices that hail it even today, I'm reminded of that kind of a double binary and double jeopardy even. The denunciation of historical, the historical dustbin versus contemporary veneration for 1984. Which way to go? Can both be true simultaneously? In this paper, I'm making an attempt to locate 1984 in terms of its heritage and legacy. In this context, I'm going to mention two earlier texts, and these two texts belong to the tradition that 1984 belongs to, and it furthers the tradition, so to say, and there also I'm going to mention two more texts. The first earlier text I'm going to mention is V, written in 1921 by Yevgeny Zamyatin, the Russian gentleman. In V, there is one state that the citizens live in houses made of glass walls. Immediately, the idea of surveillance becomes very clear. Constant state surveillance is the way of life in one state. And there, D503, who is an engineer by profession, and his state-assigned female partner, O90. O90 is too short, and therefore the government does not permit her to become pregnant at the beginning. They meet one rebellious woman, I330, who eventually takes D530 to a house called Ancient House, which has solid walls, windows that can be shut, etc. So it means there is some kind of privacy, but it is part of their history only. And in real life, they don't have anything of this sort. There, he learns about the Nessie, who contemplate rebellion against the totalitarian state, one state, so to say. And she also teaches him about the green world surrounding the place and the people outside, the furry human beings who are free outside the city walls of this one state. Now, O9 insists on becoming pregnant and insists on retaining the child, and therefore she has to be smuggled out of the country. So there is a problem at the end of the novel where D530 is captured. He betrays the woman, I330. She does not. She is sentenced to death. And D530 is given a treatment which is called a great operation. This great operation is actually using X-ray in order to operate on a part of the brain so that he will not be able to actually think of anything outside the party line or the state line. But at the end of the novel, there is a beautiful thing. There is a suggestion that the rebellion has already started and the green wall has been broken down in pieces. So though 530, after the operation, in his journal, we learned that the operation was to take place, and D503 actually believes still at the end that reason will be restored by the great benefactor being the equivalent of Big Brother over there. And he understands this, he believes in this till the end, but as we know, the rebellion has already started. Now, the parallels are obvious, I would say, so I would not belabor the point. And we all know about the Brave New, the other text, Brave New World, which was written in 1931 and published in 1932. And there we have his portrait, Mustafa Mon, the resident controller of Europe. We have Hitlerpedia. We have a promiscuous and trauma-induced happy population. We have predetermined caste system based on intelligence and labor. We have dissenting voices exiled or committing suicide. We have childhood indoctrination. Again, the parallels and contrasts are very obvious. So, what is interesting is that Orwell said Huxley's Brave New World was partly based on V by Zamyatin, but Huxley denied it. I would suggest that 1980 juncture between this heritage of V and Brave New World at that and the legacy evidence, for instance, in The Handmaid's Tale and the Testament, that is 1985 and 2019 by the Canadian author Margaret Atwood, or The Children of Men, 1992 by C.D. James. Each later novel reveals a totalitarian society again. In The Handmaid's Tale and the Testament, we have the eyes, the spies actually, and it is possible that each citizen is spying on every other citizen, again reminding us of 1984 in a major way. And there is indoctrination of the handmaids by the aunt and public hanging or brutal persecution or mangling of so-called culprits, who are not culprits actually, who are rebels. These are mangling rituals in which they're supposed to participate with frenzied hatred. So we remember Goldstein and the way the Winston and the other citizens over there, they're supposed to participate. So they're supposed to participate. It's a kind of a frenzy. So all these things we are reminded of. The Children of Men is set in 2021. That's very interesting to me. Mass infertility has resulted in Dan Whittier being appointed. He has appointed himself the Warden of England, so to say. So we are still in England, and he claims to offer social egalitarianism, and he says that what I offer freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom from boredom, but actually all democratic and civil rights are suspended, and there is this wonderful thing called quietus, which is forced suicide, waiting for people when they turn to the age of 60. So the working population has some value, otherwise nobody else matters. I talked about these 4 novels very quickly in order to talk about 1984 actually, and when we take them together, it becomes evident that Orwell's novel critiques the process of universalization through institutionalization of what we know as the panopticon and mind control today, which have the potential, this word potential I will talk about a little later, have the potential to be used to ensure any process of internalization of the ideas of totalitarianism in any sphere of life, political or otherwise. So, Jan Kott, we have all read Shakespeare, our contemporary, and we remember the book begins by talking about how Jan Kott mentions his own Polish atmosphere of the nighttime police race, midnight police race, and that is the truth with which he begins his book. The other practical example reminds us of Jeremy Bentham's 1786-88 residence in White Russia, back to Russia again, travel by a slave ship and all these things resulting in the formulation of the idea of the panopticon as a plan of constant surveillance. Foucault theorized this later. We have all read Discipline and Punish in 1975. He was talking about how this would serve not only as a major deterrent to any kind of crime, but possibly even the thought of crime. And in 1984, following Orwell sincerely, Michael Radford in his movie 1984 showed the two-way telescreen. Our Orwell had made this very, very clear in his writing. So the two-way telescreens are means of cinematographic panopticon and unimagined levels of state surveillance. We have the CCTV and continuous data surveillance today at residences, public spaces, workplaces. And the result is that this has become a part of our reality. We don't even realize the extent of this surveillance at various levels any longer, perhaps. But then this has made true the Orwellian idea that erases the courage to commit any kind of crime, even in thought, let alone in deed. And I'm also reminded of Edward Snowden, the whistleblower, in a sense, who criticized the US government for constantly depriving the citizens of their privacy in the name of national security. So there are instances in the modern world which remind us all the time of 1984. And I'm also reminded of brain-to-brain interfaces, or BBI, which has become a reality since November 2014, when Rajesh Rao and his team at the University of Washington used EEG, TMS, etc., this modern things to do with the neurosciences, to make a person act according to the wishes of another person. So they did it. And the second person became like a puppet in the hands of the first one. And this was done without surgery. Therefore, in conclusion, remembering both the criticism of legacy future and the literary and technological and experimental heritage and legacy of 1984, perhaps it would be prudent to conclude that the sex institutionalization of ideas of constant surveillance and mind control tell us about the potential that exists in the modern world, in our world.
Yeah. Please wind up. Please wind up, Joe.
I'm finished. I'm almost finished. And I'll just quote one thing from the sociologist David Leon, who, in The Rise of the Surveillance Society in 1934, concluded that no single metaphor or model is adequate to the task of summing up what is central to contemporary surveillance. But important clues are available in 1984 and in Bentham's Panopticon. So in that sense, 1984 remains our contemporary. There rests my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Devavrati. Thank you very much. Thanks. A little beyond time, but appreciate. And I'm sure it's going to invite lots and lots of questions. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Gaurav Mathur. Gaurav Mathur is assistant professor in NMIMS, Navi Mumbai. And Gaurav is going to speak on reading Lord of the Flies in a post-human era. It's over to Gaurav Mathur now.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to all panelists. Am I audible?
You are, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, sir. Perfect. The title of my paper is Reading Lord of the Flies in the post-human era. Fiction is a powerful force in shaping social understanding. And in the 20th century, a number of novels shaped philosophical discourse and influenced the way people think about the world, sometimes unveiling the truth of the human condition, which was not easily discernible among the cacophony of human views at large. William Golding's Lord of Flies, written in 1954, is well placed in the middle of a well-entrenched tradition of shipwreck inspired fiction, with the precursor of being Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, written in 1719, and the immediate inspiration being Valentine's Coral Island, 1857. On one hand, the text recounts the inevitable human survival instinct in adversity, continuing the legend of Robinson Crusoe, but doesn't merely stop at that, but recounts the darkness inherent in human spirit, also reminiscent of Conrad's Heart of Darkness, where with the falling away of the veneer of civilization, the darkness of the human spirit rises to the forefront and threatens to envelop civility and humaneness. Here it is important to note that Golding claimed that he had not read Heart of Darkness, but the entire text encompasses the same idea of the untrammeled and unexamined depths of human evil. Under the veneer of children's book, Golding attacks the sense of British pride in its own superiority, a remnant of much touted white man's burden for civilizing savages, and shows that without the rule of law and intense peer group scrutiny, the civilizers become the worse than the so-called civilized. The text, published in 1954, envisions an Third World War scenario because the shadow of another war loomed large over humanity after bearing the brunt of two mass marauders in close continuity. Instead of focusing on the macrocosm, he zeroes in on the microcosm of an uninhabited island where a group of middle school boys evacuated from school after the outbreak of war crash land on an uninhabited island and learn to survive without adult supervision. The children have all they require and are expected to create a utopia, but slowly and steadily, with probably Hobbes' and I quote, the natural condition of mankind, described in Leviathan coming into a play in the third principle, in the three principles of quarrels among men. First, the desire for gain. Second, for safety. And third, for glory, leading to unleashing of utter pandemonium in a largely organized parliamentary style of functioning. Why do British boys, conditioned and nurtured in the best conventions of the world, degenerate into superstition, mob mentality, and cause brutality so readily? To answer, the answer probably lies in what Golding himself said. In a lecture to some American students years later, Golding explained that the Great War has dispelled for him the myth of the perfectibility of the human spirit, and he had staggeringly realized, and I quote here, what man could do to another, unquote. Elucidating further, he said that, quote, I must say that anyone who moved through those years without understanding that man produces evil just as bees produces honey must have been blind or wrong in the head, unquote. With respect to the savage behaviors of the boys, the critique Timothy Garton Ash wrote in The Guardian, and I quote, remove the elementary staples of civilized, organized life, and we go back with an arch to a Hobbesian state of nature, a war of all against all, a few become temporary angels, most revert to being apes, unquote. Dystopians morphing as utopias are a recurring theme in 20th century literature, be it in Orwell's Animal Farm or Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. In Lord of Flies also, in spite of the pangs of, just a second, sorry. In spite of the pangs of paternal separation, the boys have it all idyllic. Again, remembering another great literary text from John Milton, who wrote, quote here, the mind is its own place and can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven, unquote, when it comes to the children determining what to make of their contemporary dilemma. The boys take up the utopia, but their personal ambition and refusal to be bowed down by a single authority's instructions slowly turn the utopia askew. The utopia slowly dwindles and collapses like a house of cards with ambition, cruelty, discord, trumping over amity, goodwill, and the rule of law. Voices of emotion and reason, namely Simon and Piggy, are silenced eternally. Fear psychosis, superstition, and the threat of the supernatural further hastens the march of savagery, reckless sadism, and mindless cruelty. Golding saw belief in the beast as a tipping point in the boy's journey from civilization to base human instinct. And I quote, "The world, that understandable and lawful world, was slipping away," unquote. Just as today, the world, largely viewed on a screen and not in reality, fake news, false propaganda, probably influences us more profoundly than objective, balanced perspectives. Our techno-savvy gizmos obsessed civilization has lost its essence in its pursuance of mindless recreation, as written in the book Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, a notable 20th century academic and a media theorist. When groups of people are clinging to life, the greatest threat may not be the harsh environment, starvation or dehydration, but the other survivors standing next to them on the deserted beach or the remote snow-covered mountain. Group fragmentation, leadership struggles, personal hatred, theft, abuse, frenzied violence, the discarding of empathy and compassion. These are all the things that afflict both Golding's schoolboys and many real survival groups in a world, and has become a horrifying reality in a world threatened by an elusive virus. This brings me to the contemporary relevance of Lord of the Flies in a COVID-infested post-human existence, where we are increasingly concerned and forced to withdraw into seclusion and self-preservation. I will now attempt to define the post-human, what post-human means. It's an existence where normal human emotions and reactions give way to an automated, scientific, social media generated frenzy where basic human tenets are discarded in favor of group mania and targeting of those who don't abide by the same codes and rules. The good example would be merciless trolling of our ideological opponents without any heed to the basic decorum. Chief tenets of post-human existence are lack of compassion and empathy. These tenets can be well espoused in reading of any random newspaper. Acid and disinfectant sprays on migrants to sanitize them, ousting COVID-positive neighbors from the residential blocks, apathy towards suicide victims by labeling them as possibly COVID-positive, aggressively repelling any supplicants and beggars as possible infectious, staving off starving laborers by ideologically brandishing the slogan of quote-unquote, no work, no pay, are all specimens of human behavior in a post-human world. Confronted with an emergency like the one we are witnessing currently, humanity's response has been so aggressively undertake othering, demonizing, quarantining, and betraying. What Golding had envisioned on a microcosmic level is today being enacted on a macrocosm, with all of us stranded in the island of our own homes. When we emerge from this isolation, will we, like Ralph and Jack, pretend cherubic innocence instead of owning up the deep wickedness of our hearts, which are only self-centered and self-fulfilling? Again, reflecting back to our author Golding, who hinted at some bit of ideological association with this text when he said, and I quote, "I've always understood the Nazis," he confessed, "because I am of that sort by nature," unquote. And it was, again a quote, partly out of that sad self-knowledge, unquote, that he wrote Lord of the Flies. A writer identifying the flaws in himself is probably the first step to overcoming them, but what of humanity in its post-human existence, which is self-crazy, click-happy, forward-maniacal, like stalkers, and doesn't care two hoots about his neighbor, his friends, a dependent, and does not even aspire for some self-knowledge and self-elevation. at the end of this pandemic, will we too emerge from our hiding just like the survivor boys who immediately went back at the end of the text to being innocent cherubians with all the demonism carefully concealed for any future catastrophe? I would now like to talk about some symbols in the text. There is the symbol of fire as a powerful metaphor text in the text which undergoes transmutation from being a symbol of hope and life to fire as a symbol of destruction, of innocence and triumph of evil. Jack stands for fear psychosis, exercised by 20th century leaders like Stalin, Hitler, and Mussolini, who terrified people into obedience. Ralph, on the other hand, is a hapless liberal democrat who's unable to control a boisterous populace running amok, but also possesses a stark streak of ambition which doesn't let him meekly bow out of the power tussle with Jack. Piggy is a Socratic figure. Wisdom characterized his action, and his spectacles are the manna which will save the children. Like Socrates, he was forced to partake of the poisoned chalice. Piggy also became a martyr. The killing of Simon, the prophet who brings them the message of truth as against the darkness of superstition, is destined to be killed, crucified like Christ. Christ wanted to rid humanity of superstition, looked for inspiration in nature, and believed in building amity rather than stalking discord. The prophet also recognized the darkness lying in ambush in apparently harmless individuals. Thank you very much. I hope I've finished within time.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Gaurav. Thank you. And it was a wonderfully argued paper. And particularly, I mean, the contextual, this extrapolation to the crisis of the present, that connection actually, I like particularly, and this take of post-humanist consciousness. Particularly, from the viewpoint of, say, the lack of empathy and compassion, is a is a nice take, and I'd like you to respond to that, later. Thank you very much. And now we move on to our next presenter, who happens to be Monali Chatterjee, and Monali Chatterjee is from Institute of Management, Nirma University, Ahmedabad. Monali actually is going to speak on chaos and anarchy in Golding's Lord of the Flies. Monali, please.
Thank you very much. I thank all the organizers of Shulini University for organizing this international conference. I don't know why I can't hear this. So my paper is Chaos and Anarchy in William Golding's first novel, Lord of the Flies. William Golding's first novel, Lord of the Flies, is one of the most controversial dystopian classics of modern readers, the modern readers have ever known. Since the time of its publication, it has attracted the attention of critics and researchers, students, and the casual readers alike. It raises more provocative issues that we usually hesitate to pose as a part of the civilized world. Through an unpretentious depiction of a deceptively simple tale, Golding draws to the canvas of readers' imagination a host of anguished realities about humanity and the so-called civilized world. This dystopian classic portends a devastation that our contemporary world continuously resurrects itself from. Right now, it's resurrecting itself from the COVID-19. It reminds the readers of the frailty and moral depravity of human nature by contriving a situation where the children of the human world are isolated on a secluded island. Golding demonstrates how they behave in exactly the same way as their adult counterparts do when faced with the crisis of survival and the temptation of harm. This paper attempts to undertake a contemporary reading of the persistent and perennial chaos and underlying anarchy that thrives in the seemingly organized, advanced, civilized world. For the purpose of analysis, this paper is divided into 3 sections. The first section explores the instance of chaos and anarchy in the context of the novel. The second reflects upon the ideological foundations upon which the main crux of the argument of this novel is built upon. And the third examines the historical as well as the present-day context of the chaotic world that the novel alludes to. The novel opens with a lavish of a beautiful description of a virgin island, which almost resembles the biblical paradise. A group of British schoolboys, some of whom are choir boys, are stranded on this anonymous Pacific island and are forced to create their own society. Being liberated from the impact of the adult world they are segregated from, they quickly degenerate into brutal anarchy. In the beginning, they believed that the election of a chief could lend them a certain order about them, and he could take the decisions on behalf of all the boys who had accidentally landed on the island. They accept the leadership of the kindest and the most considerate boy among them, Ralph. It is believed that this chief could relieve them of anarchy and restore a desirable and unanimous order to the children on the island. The incipient part of the novel is also founded on several instances of irony. While the children on the island look forward to solidarity, the boys in the choir, led by Jack Merridew, want to break free from their discipline and structure and become savage hunters. Secondly, the only animals that thrive on the island are pigs. A fat boy among them is also called Piggy. Jack proposes to have rules and declares, and I quote, "We have got to have rules and obey them. After all, we are not savages. We are English, and the English are best at everything. So we have got to have the right things." On the other hand, the conch becomes a symbol of power and authority. The resolution to break into chaos is made early in the story when Ralph proclaims, "This is our island, and it is a good island. Until the grown-ups come and fetch us, we'll have fun." The allusions to the snake-like beastie lighting up the fire, disappearance of the little boy who spoke about the beast, signify the early foreshadowing of the impending chaos and doom that are to befall the children. In the novel, Ralph maintains order and tries to protect and support the children, particularly the wise, impulsive, seeming, and clumsy, vulnerable Piggy, who is also asthmatic and myopic. However, the sliding down to savagery is more beguiling and easier than to be morally upright. Realizing this, the chorister leader, Jack, separates from the group, lowers the others to follow him, and sets up a hunt. After killing a wild pig, Jack and his followers paint their faces and bodies with blood and clay and dance savagely to wild incantations and become increasingly ruthless until they shake the moral foundations of the less innocuous children on the island. However, Piggy never loses his unflinching conviction in norms of the civilized society. This courage costs him his life. With the accidental fall of Piggy, the last remnants of human virtue also collapse, and with the shattering of the conch shell into 1,000 fragments, order in the island is also diminished. This unleashes a complete chaos and anarchy that pursues Ralph in the form of a lethal forest fire and ferocious hunters. Ironically, this fire that is intended to kill Ralph emits the smoke that is spotted by a rescue squad of a steamer that saves all the children on the island. Yet, reflecting upon the deaths, destruction, chaos, and anarchy, Ralph weeps, and I quote, "for the end of innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of the true, wise friend called Piggy," unquote. Ideological frameworks. This is the second part. It is interesting to see how the novel heaves upon a gamut of ideological frameworks that have flourished for centuries. The optimism of Ralph and Piggy that they will be rescued soon by the adult world reflects the Calvinistic emphasis on the doctrine of predestination. Ralph's stern reminders to the boys about hygiene when they are taken short and instructions about the rocks are to be used as lavatory are rooted in its conservatism that are imparted to him in the civilized world. Jack's impressive villainy and antinomianism acting against the legal, moral, and social or religious customs strengthens the conflict and crisis of the story. His savagery and violence shakes and devolves the stable and systematic into chaos and disruption. Thus, by virtue of this novel, Golding had been able to secure a place in the ideological tradition of Calvinism, conservatism, and antinomianism. The novel iterates that man is inherently a savage and the beast gives itself away at every available opportunity. In The Hot Cakes and the Other Occasional Pieces, this is a work by Golding, Golding observes, I must say that anyone who passed through those years of the Second World War without understanding that man produces evil as a bee produces honey must be blind or wrong in the head. However, Thomas Hobbes says that we as human beings are not naturally political animals like bees or ants who instinctively cooperate and work together for the common good. Instead, we are naturally self-interested and look out for ourselves first and foremost. We care about our reputation as well as our material well-being, and our desire for social standing drives us into conflict as much as competition over scarce resources. The third part of my paper, a very short one, William Golding's novel is an angst-ridden deliberation on the evil propensity of human beings. Golding witnessed the terrors of mankind while fighting in the Royal Navy during the Second World War. When the novel was published, England was yet the center and epitome of sovereign stability and enlightenment and civilized tradition. Many nations had already been engulfed by the threat of a nuclear war and the disillusionment of the world wars. According to Golding, the proclivity for savagery was not limited to the Germans alone, but thrived in every human. I come to the final part of my paper. In the wake of the war, Golding resumed teaching. The Lord of the Flies was his first attempt at writing novels. It ultimately became a bestseller in both Britain and the United States after more than 20 publishers rejected it. Without being didactic, Golding brings home to the readers these sensitive concerns that the Lord of the Flies spoke in the voice of a schoolmaster. To conclude, the Lord of the Flies remains a prominent signpost even in the present day as an allegory of not only the savagery of the Second World War, but of the chaos and anarchy that thrives in the contemporary age and the present day. The sudden disappearance of the child with a mulberry-colored mark on his face and the accidental murder of the Christ-like and sensitive Simon by the delirious hunters certainly recalls Darwin's ideas of the survival of the fittest. Even till this day, economically weaker nations often fall prey to the exploitation and dominance of the superpowers over them. In an age where almost every global crisis attempts to threaten and shake the foundations of the highly venerated and complacent establishments, it is rewarding to revisit this great, popular, and widely explored classic in a new light through the lens of disruption as a continual but inevitable process. Thank you very much.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Monali. Thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, two things, of course, just think about them, the notion of disruption. And second one, of course, is this contemporary reading of a text. So just stay tuned. Maybe you might possibly respond to that later. And I'd like to move on to Rashmi Lee George now. She's Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Autonomous, Mumbai. And she's going to look at the Lord of the Flies through an eco-critical lens. Yes, over to Rashmi Lee George.
Thank you, sir. And am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, first of all, for making this platform available to all of us. I thank the organizers, particularly Professor Deepa, for taking the initiative to come together and discuss some interesting texts. I fellow presenters, especially the one who presented Lord of the Flies, because I can come down to the bare essentials.
Sure, sure.
Because I'm looking at the fly from an eco lens, I just want to begin with is eco-criticism, and in Cheryl Jotfelty's words, to simply put it, it is the study of relationships within literature and the environment. And if you think of Lord of the Flies, it is a novel that is so place-centric, and it is so significantly place-centric because if it was not for that place, maybe the result of that novel would have been different. The isolation on the island becomes the key to the action in the novel. The opening of the novel is a description of the place. It sets the novel in place. It talks about the heat on the island. It talks about what we look forward to in terms of the foreboding that announces different things. The fire on the island, or the imaginary snakes, the conch that is found, the conch that is used for the initial egalitarianism, the impact of the island on the little ones, the big ones, Simon Forens, all of those, the place of the island becomes important. For 12-year-old Ralph, it's a place where he can feel his independence because there are no grown-ups around. Secondly, for the likes of Jack, the island invites them to explore the spirit of adventure and to do adult things like hunting a pig, for instance. And hunting a pig is not merely for survival or subsistence, it is also to prove one's ability as a leader. So the place or the island therefore leads the children also to engage in their bestial instincts. It compels them to show them their real identities, and it is on the island that the children discover that they are capable of harm. The second point that I'd like to discuss is the notion of deep ecology, which is also another strand of eco-criticism, and the idea of deep ecology with regard to Lord of the Flies, for instance. The idea of deep ecology is Arnie Mace. There are many tenets to deep ecology, but I want to talk about the most principal one, which is to believe that humans and non-humans have value. And if you look at Lord of the Flies, somebody like a Jack dismisses the weaker ones, whereas someone like a Simon enjoys the island, the place, and that place becomes a stimulative, or it becomes a stimulus for his meditative and contemplative. It is that place, and also to the discovery of what or who is the actual beast on the island. So it's very interesting that from a deep ecological point of view, it is Simon who fits that mold, or fits the mold of treating both the human and non-human with a certain value, because it is he who helps little ones very often. He's respectful of Piggy, who even Ralph dismisses in the beginning. He is the one who engages in a conversation with the Lord of the Flies, or the head of the sow. And he is the one who releases the dead parachutist from the indignity of his death. And finally, he becomes the ultimate sacrifice to save the children from the belief that there is actually a beast. That's my second point. The third point is regarding dynamics of gender. It's very interesting. It doesn't have female characters. Except for Piggy's unfulfilled mention, there aren't women characters in the novel. But while we speak of looking at the novel from an eco-critical point of view, it's also important to bring in the element of ecofeminism here. Ecofeminism basically started off by showcasing the connection between the oppression of women and the oppression of nature. And of course, it progressed to identify the interrelationships between gender, race, class, and the exploitation of the environment. In Lord of the Flies, of course, exploitation of the environment is not the primary discussion. However, it is a latent idea. If the boys had continued to live on the island, they would have probably destroyed it completely. beyond redemption. And we know that in the end of the novel, in order to literally smoke out Ralph, they set fire to that island. And of course, they were not obviously aware of the consequences. So, however, it doesn't take away the fact that it was going to cost the place very much. However, and also moving on further about the idea of gender. Gender maybe is invisible, yet it is also visible. Piggy is almost the mother figure. It is unfair to draw binaries, I think, in a novel such as this. But one can't dismiss the fact that the novel depicts a certain kind of male bonding. The boys on the expedition, for instance, toxic masculinity in the making of, say, a Jack or a Roger, the alpha male image in the form of a Jack, and Ralph, at least in the beginning. Since Piggy doesn't fit into any of these categories, because he wears spectacles and has asthma and speaks English in its variant form, he becomes the proverbial weaker sex. He doesn't do any of the activities that the so-called alpha males in the making do. For example, he's not athletic, he can't climb or hunt, and he's good with the little ones, and he wants to make shelters. No one, of course, including Ralph, is able to acknowledge his intelligence. It takes Ralph a long, long time to acknowledge Piggy's intelligence, which is also regarded, by the way, very masculine. However, in the novel, Golding himself, or the narrator, makes this remark that the greatest ideas are the simplest. Moving on further into the notion of gender, and I find that a fascinating idea. The aggression of the males is noticeable in the novel in the killing of that sow. If you can recall that scene, it's such a violent image. And I argue that although no women are mentioned in the novel except for Piggy's aunt, the killing of the sow is an example of the aggression perpetrated against the feminine. And I would like to read that part. They could see her now, nearly got up with her, but she spurted with her last strength and held ahead of them again. They were just behind her when she staggered into an open space where bright flowers grew and butterflies danced round each other, and the air was hot and still. Here, struck down by the heat, the sow fell, and the hunters hurled themselves at her. This dreadful eruption from an unknown world made her frantic. She squealed and bucked, and the air was full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. Roger ran round the heap, prodding with a spear whenever pig flesh appeared. Jack was on top of the sow, stabbing downward with his knife. Roger found a lodgment for his point and began to push till he was leaning with his whole weight. The spear moved forward inch by inch, and the terrified squealing became a high-pitched scream. Then Jack found the throat, and the hot blood spouted over his hands. The sow collapsed under them, and they were heavy and fulfilled upon her. And I want to imagine that this is a metaphor for a rape. This is a metaphor, a sexualized metaphor. And therefore, I want to believe that although no women are particularly mentioned in the novel, the idea of the feminine and the dynamics of gender gets played out over here. And going back to the notion of ecofeminism, the oppression of the feminine and the oppression of nature would then go together. My last point is the notion of eco-psychology to be read against Lord of the Flies. And I want to quote John Mack over here. The psychology of the environment would be an expanded psychology of relationship, a conversation or experiencing in the deepest parts of our being, of our connection with the earth as sacred. It basically believes in the notion that one cannot have sanity without a sane relationship with the environment. It's very important. And we think that eco-psychology is a new term, but if we were to look at indigenous cultures across the world, eco-psychology has always been there. Because they believe that there was no other way to heal than to work within the context of environmental reciprocity. Now, Simon, for example, in the novel, Simon was younger to Jack, and Ralph goes into the secret places to be with himself or to be by himself or with nature. And it is in this communion with nature that he has an encounter with the head of the sow or the Lord of the Flies. And that's where he discovers the intricate realities of life. He is the one who discovers the problem of evil. And I want to quote, "Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill." said the head. In case of Ralph, he'll go back home a changed person. His experience on the island will become his reason for a change. His psyche will never be the same, because at the end, I want to quote that, and the earlier speaker also quoted the same line. And in the middle of them, with filthy body, matted hair, and unwiped nose, Ralph wept for the end of innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of the true wise friend called Piggy. Now, Piggy and Simon, both of them become, so for example, Piggy stands for rationality and Simon stands for intuition. Simon stands for a spiritual connect. Simon stands for something that is intangible. And when you talk of eco-psychology, it is also about the sanity that can come about only with a healthy relationship with the environment. And we find that Jack and the others are soon losing that. These are the 4 points that I wanted to make, and I would be happy to take questions after this. So thank you very much for your patient hearing.
The points that you made actually are really, really insightful, wonderful. Particularly, I mean, the issue of gender that you brought in, that's pretty powerful. Thank you very much, Rashmi. So we are over with the presentation part. Now we can have questions. Can I have Ma'am Jaitka over? Professor Jaitka, please.
Yes, I'm back.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so presentations are over, and now we can take questions. Yeah, Nilak, can I?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, Nilak, are you there? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So actually, that epistemology actually of the post-truth was what I had. Let's just initiate it, and then questions will keep coming in, right? Would you like to respond to that, Nilak?
Could you kindly repeat your question, please, if you...
My question is just your response to this epistemology of post-truth, that you have been able to read through 1984. I mean, of course, I mean, you refer to this metaphor called double speak, or, I mean, the basic double think, basically. So if false logic prevails, at both the ends, but the whole idea basically of post-truth is too far away from logic, rationale, or something like that. So I was just concerned about your epistemological take on it as to how do you locate, I mean, post-truth in the entire discourse of truth. Are we in any way viewing it as maybe something which is contrary to truth, or something which is absolutely removed from the whole idea, whole notion of truth? Nilak, am I clear?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Now the question is very multi-layered. So without taxing anyone's patience, I'll get to it. I'll get to it as quickly as possible. Now, one of the aspects of post-truth is our dependence on what is called social media, which is key to becoming the de facto source of news. The deepest irony, of course, in this conference is that our work is going to be, broadcast over social media. So the blurring of boundaries between objectivity and partisanship in news reporting that one sees in, oh my God, Facebook, which is why I said deeply ironical, YouTube, which was, Twitter, for instance. So 2004, 2005, 2006. FB, YouTube, and Twitter. News becomes info siloing activity, right? Information siloing. Now, this willful neglect of objective facticity to suit our own interests, this has led to what many people have been calling the erosion of our thinking skills. And I think that the issue with the president of a certain important nation, whom we shall not perhaps have to mention, being a purveyor of post-truth, you know whom I'm talking about.
All right.
That has become a major issue. So in this lucrative market of the partial, where the focus is on the relativity of truth, its individualization, which has resulted in fears of political passivity, to the extent that it's not possible to claim that there is any sense of objectivity and universality in politics, for instance, or due to the presence of cultural relativism, where one cannot, in theory, claim that an intolerant society is inferior to a tolerant one. So this kind of problem has led to what many people have called a folk epistemology, a folk, F-O-L-K, folk epistemology, which is where the epistemological component really comes in, post-truth, this sense of relative, unrelative, that problem. I hope I was able to address that.
Yeah, absolutely, Anurag. Thank you very much. Yeah, do we have any other questions, please? From the participants, from other panelists, please feel free. Yeah, from Urmi, Satyan to all panelists. Yeah, I can, wait a sec. Now.
There is a question to Monali. It's come on Facebook. You know, we have been live streaming on Facebook, by the way. And the question to Monali says, do you find any similarities between English, in quotes, English children on the island and contemporary India? Monali.
In case this kind of an attitude that
please louder, we can't hear you. Louder.
Am I louder?
Monali, louder. Yeah.
So what I was trying to point out when I mentioned the English in the papers is simply that am I audible?
You are, absolutely. Go ahead.
Carry on.
Is simply an attitude. It is not really a geographical location or related to somebody belonging to a certain country. It is the attitude of excessive complacency, of aggression, of imagining oneself to be of a very higher quality. So maybe in that context, we cannot really say that these children belong to a certain place as such. They could be children from all over the place, really anywhere. But the attitude was like, okay, we are English and so we should be impeccable. So this actually refers to a certain kind of an attitude that England had adopted just during the Second World War, and which is what Golding is critiquing.
Yeah, so any other question?
We can relate this question to, you know, what Rashmi said about eco-psychology.
Yes.
Yes, Rashmi, would you like to respond? Come in.
Yes. Yeah, at this point, regarding the English children, I find it very interesting that Golding chose to have a novel with English children, because it in a way critiques the whole idea and the project of imperialism too. Because his novel was published in 1954, although it's set in the Second World War and the backdrop of the Second World War. I think he's also suggesting that, yes, here is a country which thinks that we are the land where the sun never sets, and we are the best.
Right.
And in a way, mocking that idea of superiority. And he challenges everything. For instance, the whole notion of children being innocent. So it's also going against the Wordsworthian notion of innocence and simplicity, and taking the idea or understanding humanity at a different level. Because in the Second World War, I think there was no pretense about the kind of torture that we are capable of. And English children, he belonged to England. Perhaps it was easier for him to just use his own nationality. But as Monali mentioned, I think it could be anywhere. And I want to also respond to another question which came in, which says, is it difficult to teach Lord of the Flies in the class? I would think no. Because the problem that we discussed, it's time and place. I think it's one of the most relevant novels that you can teach now in any particular class. And of course, we spoke about 1984. There can't be more relevant novels than these to be taken up in any given.
Absolutely.
So important.
Absolutely.
around these topics.
Having such contextual relevance, absolutely. Such contextually relevant texts, both, absolutely. Yeah, Devarati, Professor Devarati, would you like to come in?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
There's a question from Professor Ahmed Aslan Al-Zaman, and he has asked Nilak, myself, and Dr. Gaurav about the post-human. Is the post-human an advancement upon constructed truth? So, if the other two gentlemen would like to answer this question. Yes.
Wait.
Gaurav,
Gaurav.
Yeah, so,
yeah, Gaurav, would you like to respond to that? Gaurav.
Unmute yourself.
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
I could not get the whole thing that you asked, maybe because of the the voice. But yes, I can relate it. It can easily be related. See, as I see literature, it's a continuation of what happens to human civilization in a particular point in time, and how that civilization carries it forward, and how the literature goes forward with it. So, for example, when 1984 was written, it was not a post-truth era at all. But look how easily the novel fits in there. Okay, so for example, and post-truth is a typically political media theory which has recently come up, but it has engulfed the whole literature like anything. Similarly, for what I have talked of post-human situation that we are in, and we are not in a world war like situation. It's no third world war happening, but our response is such, and look the way we as individuals are reacting to it, the stories that we are listening to. Okay, it puts it into the same ambit, in the same scenario, and then these literatures, they resonate in our minds. And where do I find myself as a human being, or where do I see my society along with me, and how we are reciprocating to each other? I'm not somebody who restricts oneself only to literature or to the theory and application of theory. I try to see it beyond the literature and into lives. Okay, so that is what post-human we have become. We sit in our rooms, we pass on messages, we don't verify them. And again, coming back to post-truth, it makes truth irrelevant. It is about perception. It is not about verification. Okay, it's about your inability to say that, oh my God, I think that it's a lie you are telling to me, and I'm not ready to accept it.
Okay.
I fail to react to that. Similarly, when we read this literature and we see ourselves, we see, okay, as a human being also, we are degenerating. We are becoming something else. And how shall we react, and how shall we look back to ourselves once this whole thing is over, and by the grace of God, we are alive to react to it. So that's how I see it.
Oh, Gaurav, thank you. Now, here's a question from Sanjay Mukherjee to Professor Nilak. Besides contradictions, such as the Ministry of Truth spreads lies, Ministry of Love deals with pain and torture, isn't Orwell critiquing large intellectual or abstract notions like poetic truth or platonic love? This is actually Professor Sanjay Mukherjee to Nilak. Nilak, please.
This is a brilliant question, and it's something that has bugged me for a long time. One of the things I will say is the relationship between Julia and Winston explodes in the novel. Quite literally, just happens. Boom! It really literally happens. They consummate the relationship in the middle of a forest or something, and that making love becomes a political act. I mean, it is mind-blowing in some way. And one of the things that does happen gradually is that their relationship settles down into what one could call a kind of happy domesticity, as far as it is practicable under the circumstances of the Big Brother surveillance. I am seeing exactly what you're doing. Now, there are moments of enormous tenderness between Julia and, and Winston. The very act of this young woman putting on lipstick just because she wants something. I don't know, it's indescribable. You don't see that in D.H. Lawrence. You don't see that in Virginia Woolf. You don't see that in a lot of the so-called, flesh and blood and bone kind of novels. You don't see that, but you see this here. So Professor Mukherjee, I have to say, he's critiquing it, but I think he's reinstating those moments of resistance. Love making is resistance. Love making, genuine affection is resistance. Let us fight it. Let us fight the system. I think that there is a way in which Orwell is saying, to put it very crudely, let's not make, let's make love, not war, or something like that. But I think he's trying to literally fight the system and tell them that it is possible. And Foucault does that too, by the way, in a very different way, of saying that that resistance can be located within small individual groups or within small individuals. Individuals can make changes happen. Julia lives in the book. She does. So does Winston, right? Whereas Symes and other characters just go out poof like that. But Julia lives on and lingers on in your memory. I think that is a very powerful statement of reinstating love back into the equation, making it more human, more you can feel that character.
You can feel it. You can feel that. Yeah. Thank you, Nila. Thank you very much. Yeah, for Rashmi, would you respond to this notion of eco-psychology a little more? Because that's really interesting, the way you read it, particularly from the viewpoint of the relationship of these youngsters with the island. Could you dwell upon it a little more, Rashmi?
Yeah, I can.
Please.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Yes. Go ahead, please.
I mentioned eco-psychology. For example, I'd also like to talk about a few other things in that context.
That's.
For example, when you discuss eco-psychology, there are notions of original trauma and notions of species arrogance, and I'll explain that in a minute. When you talk about original trauma, it is about picking up addictions, picking up things that are going to cause problems for state of being, your state of living. So addiction is one of the examples. And when you look at, say, for example, in case of Lord of the Flies, I would think that Jack is getting addicted, something like bloodletting or something like hunting, which looks like a simple activity into inverted commas, but find that touching upon something very carnal, and we find that as a group into a situation where cut the throat, spill becomes it for existence, a chant for chant to keep themselves protected. They feel secure in those kind of chants, and it shows that their connect with the environment has got tampered because of something that has taken or replaced the notion of getting rescued from the island. They're not thinking of rescue anymore. They're thinking of how to live. Jack is no longer called Jack at the end of the novel. He's called the chief, and he makes them perpetrate. So the idea of original trauma, which is also an aspect of eco-psychology, because it talks about sanity, and we find that slowly Jack, Roger, and many others in that novel are cruel for the sake of being cruel, because they come in, they use a spear to torture Sam and Eric, for instance, the twins. Explanation to the torture, it's just there and it's systematic and it is there to control. That is one of the examples. The other example, when we talk of species arrogance is another term used by John Mack within the context of eco-psychology. And John Mack talks about how mine the earth, for instance, the activity of mining. It is, you take natural resources from the earth, destroy something, or even exploit to such an extent that you decimate it completely. We find that happen also within Lord of the Flies. I want to imagine that if they were not rescued the island, and if they stopped finding cows, they would have turned against each other. Who knows? They would have become cannibals. If we could have done.
Okay, right.
It's about the idea of the ego in a kind of a peaceful and connection.
Okay.
Something to do, for example, within a Simon, or maybe a Piggy or a reformed Ralph, because Ralph also is one whom you could critique. He's not nobody is perfect, but Ralph also in the beginning, yes, he's a great leader, but he also started with that. He is the first one to betray Piggy when he says that his name is Piggy. When Piggy actually tells him that he never his actual name, he is called Piggy all the time. So the first betrayal in the novel is by Ralph, who becomes, and it's also Ralph that you see. So when you speak of a notion of eco-psychology, it is Ralph's psychology and his connection.
Excuse me.
Okay. Okay, Rashmi. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Over to Ma'am Jaidka, please.
No, we can continue, but I want to say that this was really a high-powered session. A high-powered session with people like Debarati and Nilak and Rashmi and Monali and Gaurav and Pratima. Where's Pratima? I think she's dropped out. So, but unfortunately, the technology has not been with us all along. Monali got almost locked out and she had to keep banging on the doors until finally technology was able to open it for her. And Rashmi got an excellent paper, but half of it was echoing. It was echoing too much. We felt we were in an echo chamber. But it was really very good. And well, Nilak was very clear. Debarati, but there were sound issues with you also. But I just wanted to point this out so that, you know, in future, whenever you make a presentation, try and ensure that your speaker and your headphones are good and there's no echo. Something went wrong somewhere today. So I mean, the impact could have been far greater. But we'll continue the discussion. I just had one thought. It was Yeats, who, at the beginning of the 20th century, who said something like, the mind of man has two kinds of shepherds. Two kinds of shepherds. Those who move and trouble and those who hush and console. So there are two types of writers. And the kind of writers we have been talking about today are dystopian. They are the ones who move and trouble. Now, what do you think? We'll just do a quick round, Roshan, with your permission. We'll just
Sure, ma'am. Please go ahead, please.
And the faculty of my department out here. And I want their opinion on what kind of writers do we need today? Do we need shepherds who can move and trouble, or do we need shepherds who can hush and console and tell you all's well with the world, God's in his heaven and everything will be well? So what kind of writers, what kind of shepherds do we use? Roshan, if you could go around.
Yeah, please. I mean, I hope all the panelists today, they got the question. So shall I go to Professor Debarati first for that response? Debarati, can you hear me?
I can't actually.
Yeah, now you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I am okay, but I can't hear you people because it's echoing a lot.
Okay.
No.
What kind of writers do we need today? What kind of writers do we need today? No.
Yes, ma'am. It's okay. It's okay, Debarati. Fine.
No.
Nilak, would you take that? Okay, Debarati, thank you. It's okay. Nilak, would you like to respond to that?
I would take the first category. The category that pokes and prods you and gives you a little jab in the ribs, you know, sort of like the jab that Jesus got during the crucifixion. The Lord be praised. The sort of writer that jabs you literally in the eye and says, hey, wake up, wake up. This world is coming to pieces and there is something you have got to do about it. Whether it is in the ecological sense of the term, whether it is as in Professor Mathur's sense, you know, the post-human aspect of it, whether it is post-truth and so on. All these issues I think are pertinent. Our world is literally falling apart in some way, in more ways than one. I think we need writers who will poke you. That's what we need.
Yeah. Gaurav, your take. Gaurav, can I have you over?
Absolutely with Professor Nilak, he's right in saying, so we need writers who you know, really tell us that the things are falling apart and the center cannot hold. So we need a center, we need somebody to hold it together for us. So all for it.
We've got yet another one. Yeah, Monali, are you there now?
Yes, she's there.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Please.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
I also go by the first category, wherein the author does make us think, he prods us, he reminds us in more than just painful ways, without being didactic, as even William Golding did. But then he made us think for months when I read this novel, and I could have never thought that, ironically, these children, they are children after all. I mean, they are the epitome of innocence, as Rashmi was telling us. And I would just want the kind of authors who really make us think and look at ourselves, introspect, and then see if the world can be a better place.
All right, thank you. Now, we are really sorry about Pratima Agnihotri. We're not very sure as to whether Pratima would really be able to take this question. But if your audio quality is not good, Pratima, that's fine. You're there. We really appreciate your presence. But then, it's over to Rashmi now. Rashmi, how would you respond to that briefly?
And the audio, Rashmi, your audio also is not too good. So just make it short and clear, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I would think that writers should really show a mirror to society. Not in the, I'm not suggesting that it's always realism that should take over, but I think writers need to write what they see and express, or at least showcase the sensibility of the age.
Thank you, Rashmi. Yeah, ma'am, did you suggest at that point in time that I should take Shulini faculty also on board?
Yes.
Do we have Neeraj? Neeraj, would you like to share your ideas about the deliberations today, or this question in particular?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. No question, sir, but a lovely session, sir. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Neeraj,
Yes,
you
yes,
want your question.
Hello.
We want your answer to this question. What kind of writers do we require? And Pratima,
I would like to go. I would like to go with the first one, ma'am. First one.
Okay. All for the first one. Yeah. Another faculty of yours, ma'am. I've forgotten her name. She's Ms. Negi.
Lata. Yeah, Lata.
Lata. Yes. Lata, can I have you over?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good
I'm
afternoon,
so sorry.
dear.
Can you please repeat that question again? I've lost it.
Ma'am, please.
What kind of writers do we need in today's world? What kind of writers do we need in today's world? Do we want writers who will shake us out of our complacencies? Or do we need writers who will tell us, never mind, everything is all right, all is hunky-dory?
I think, in my opinion, we need the second kind of writers, you know.
After my heart.
Okay, there's somebody at least.
It can be a form of escape. Now, you know, Nasser is raising his hand, and Nasser is the one who's going to be the chair tomorrow. Nasser, are you there? Nasser?
Does he have some question, some concern that he wants to share? We can have him over, ma'am.
Nasser, can you hear me? Raise your hand, please, again, if you can hear me. Nasser, I just saw him. Meanwhile, Purnima, why don't you answer this question?
Thank you so much, ma'am. So definitely I'm going to support the other panelists today, because we want such of writers in this century who can shake us out of our normal lives, because for me, literature is the reflection of life, and vice versa. So for me, I guess we need the writers who just make us come with the realities, and we are trying to get out of what exactly is happening around us.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. With that, I'd like to place on record, this deep sense of appreciation to each and every presenter today, despite that audio issues. We still could pull through the session pretty successfully, pretty satisfactorily. So I thank you all. Thank you very much for bringing this kind of quality to this webinar. And ma'am, thank you very much for according us this opportunity.
Roshan,
Thanks, Shulini. Thank you so very much. much.
No, you can't go so soon because because we have a gentleman from Iran and a gentleman.
All right. Wow.
Iran, yeah. So let's.
Nasser is what you.
I'm trying to unmute him, but I can't. Okay, Nasser. Nasser is from Iran and he has to chair one of our sessions.
Okay, maybe I know Nasser.
Perhaps.
If Nasser at any point been, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, just Professor Jessica, I wanted to.
Yes, there he is. But your video,
Your video, Nasser?
Actually, just I wanted to ask the same question from Dr. Eager to hear her own idea about what kind of author do we need these days.
Okay, all right. So it's more or less the same question. What kind of author do you need today? But let me share my take on it.
Hi, Nasser.
All right, Nasser. Thank you.
Hi, Professor. Hi.
How are things in Iran? How's everything in Iran?
It seems it gets better day after day, and I'm so happy today to see all of you here. And I have the same question. It's a great question, Professor Jetka actually just asked from everybody. What kind of author do we need these days in these actually just coronavirus-oriented days, or just in 21st century? Jetka is an amazing, actually, author, poet, playwright. So I'm so eager to know her idea.
Her take on it. Yeah, Nasser. Professor Nasser, I agree with you. Yes, Professor Jetka, you have to take it now.
You know what? I have a bright idea. And I'm going to share it with all the panelists and the attendees. And we have about 50 of them who are actually listening in. And I would like to say that I want to put together a collection of stories related to the corona pandemic. You know, stories of people who have suffered, people that you know of, stories that you know of as first hand. So if you have any stories, why don't you send them to me?
All right, that's great.
To me. And finally, out of all this tragedy, maybe some light of hope will emerge. You know, like the phoenix has to destroy itself, burn itself in order to be reborn.
Definitely.
So we are living in difficult times. There are so many things that hurt us. There are times when we don't want to listen to the news on the TV. We switch it off because we can't bear. Human beings cannot bear too much reality. There are times when we just throw the newspaper aside.
We do.
But let us collect these stories. So if
we really need to.
You can email short stories, you know, that you have personally encountered. I would really appreciate that. And let's see what we can do with them. Over to you, Roshan.
Yes. Yeah, Nasser, thank you very much for being there. And thanks very much for sharing your experience of how you felt. We too are delighted to see you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question. And
Nasser, make sure that your audio is better tomorrow because your voice is really disturbed. And Ahmed is here too on the screen. Ahmed from Bangladesh. We hope Chakravarti does not overtake you. So let us pray that you also come back when your session is due.
Yeah. With that, may I thank all the panelists now, ma'am?
Yes. And then my
thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. And I really appreciate this effort on the part of the Department of English, Shoolini University. We are thankful that we are part of this webinar, this week-long webinar, and such activities must go on. I'm so very happy. I've circulated this information among all my researchers and postgraduate students. I don't know as to whether they have really joined and they have joined us in today. But tomorrow I'll make sure that most of them come, because most of the texts are there. in the syllabi and the course content being taught across India. So I mean, it's really beneficial, from multifarious, from diverse perspectives from the viewpoint of our PG students as well as our scholars. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And thank you all the panelists, and thanks the faculty of the Department of English, Shoolini University.
And all the panelists and attendees need to know that you are being watched, not by Big Brother, but by thousands of people across the country. Yesterday's session had about 2,000 views, and Friday's session had many more than that. And I'm sure today's also will go a long way. Why don't you pass on the link to your friends, to your students, to people who would be interested? And I'm sure you will get a lot of people watching them, and I'll update you. So before we wind up, my department would like to say a word to you. Purnima, to begin with, Purnima Bali. Purnima, where are you?
Thank you so much. Roshan sir, it's always great having you here and wherever we are listening to you. And thank you all the presenters and the participants for being the part of the second day of the international seminar. We are surely achieving one of the themes of the seminar, and that's what we are getting back to the text. And I'm sure all of us are going to pick up some text today and start reading, hopefully. And thank you for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Purnima.
Thanks, Purnima.
Lata, where are you, Lata?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, everyone. So, yeah, we have experienced some technical issues today, but it was indeed a stimulating session. And I would like to thank everyone for your active participation and open dialogue. And thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lata. Thank you.
And last but not the least, our young man Neeraj.
I'm the last one today. Thank you, ma'am. So another wonderful day of this international seminar. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are absolutely.
So another wonderful day of this international seminar. First of all, I would like to thank each speaker for today's session, and what a lovely session that we had today. And now I'm feeling honored because my colleagues and Manju ma'am, they have given me this responsibility to thank our chairperson. So I would like to thank Professor Roshan for chairing today's session. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And I would like to add more here that why I'm excited, because I and the Professor Roshan, we are from same town. We are from Surat, and we are and we have studied from the same college. But
yes, absolutely.
But there was difference of a decade or two, and
absolutely.
That doesn't make you old, sir. You're always young.
Thank you.
So,
thanks.
I would like to add more that when I was in my graduation, I heard many stories about Roshan sir, because he was there.
My God.
I heard stories about his way of teaching and interacting with students in the class. So when I was in graduation, he was there in Solon College, and then when I entered into my masters, then he shifted to Central University. So I never got chance to learn directly from you, but in fact, and definitely you have passed on your teachings to the generation, because most of my professors in my masters, they were your students, sir. Shivani ma'am, Meenu ma'am.
Right.
So thanks a lot for everything, sir. Everything you have given to us.
Welcome, dear.
And once again, thanks for chairing today's session. And I would also like to thank my colleagues and the Shoolini University for giving us this platform and believing in us. And again, our IT team, the technical support they have provided us, Dr. Kamal Khan, Amar sir, for everything. And last but not least, I would like to thank my colleagues and Manju ma'am for everything, for guiding us. And she's the driving force behind this international seminar. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Roshan.
Thank you all. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
And all the delegates, all the panelists, all the attendees, and all those countless numbers who are following us while we are being streamlined on Facebook, on YouTube. Thank you very much, and we meet again tomorrow.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Same place in the Zoom room. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Have a nice evening. Bye.